Hello to all and a very warm welcome. I recently realized I had a monograph really of work I did at about 52 pages long on astrotheology and its real incorporation into the first books of the New Testament. I'm talking about Revelation and also Mark's Gospel, I think more specifically than the others, though there are, of course, reverberations of star worship, of celestial worship and veneration in the other Gospels. What I'm going to do is actually, in the next few days, go through that book, probably do about 5 or 6 pages per, if you like, chapter, um, and or basically regale you all of some of these things that I've picked up over the years, and also at the same time start putting out the pagan witnesses, of course working back in time. So I just wanted to say that this is going to be the first chapter. It incorporates the introduction into this work, so there are quite a few aspects within the Gospel of Mark that are just quite patently astro-theological. And of course, the first chapter really goes into the Old Testament and tells us a lot about the veneration of the stars, the heavenly choir, and so on. In the Old Testament, which is quite open, it's quite apparent. So I hope you enjoy this, and here we go. Thomas 77 here. This is the Gospel of Thomas. Jesus said, "It is I who am the light which is above them all." What can that mean? The Christian religion is a parody of the worship of the sun, in which they put a man whom they call Christ in the place of the sun and pay him the same adoration which was originally paid to the sun. That's Thomas Paine. The initiated ancient Egyptian hierophants, the learned Hebrew Tanaim, and later the the church's own Alexandrian father, notably Clement and Origen, and above all Philo, the Jewish philosopher of the first Christian century, all declared that underneath the literal surface meaning of the scriptures, astute intelligence could discern a far more subtle significance hidden by allegorical cleverness under terms of common usage. That's Elvid Boyd Kuhn, Christ's 3 Days in Hell. This monograph, as is much recent work on the subject, a tentative look into the basis of pagan and Christian religion and its founding of star worship, though some of the assertions made here are speculative and some of the associations made are subject to interpretation, they do hold certain empirical value in the overall study of the ancient mind and the basis upon which Christianity may likely exist, as we shall discover in the coming pages. We may then very well state that yes, this title is appropriate. The Gospel of Mark is in substantial terms, a treatise on astrology. Just as the Greeks and Romans related their gods to the heavenly choir before Christianity came onto the stage, we do see other influences too. However, there are some key features spread across this gospel, like the other four, owe a lot to the Old Testament's multi-level, not either or, but both and non-linear and non-dualistic interpretation. We wish to state outright that there seems to be some truly multi-dimensional anagogical thinking at play, with the knowledge running deep to the inner porticos of these mysterious texts. They speak of truth on levels above, levels below, and levels within. At the surface level of scripture, or the garment, say, we find the literal stories, but there is much that lies beneath. Fractal logic and self-same principles that become known to the master, who, has harmonized the forces within and without, and has seen that the potency of his resurrection has everything to do with spiritual calibrating and conjugating with the phases of the universe within you and without you, to borrow a phrase from the popular Beatles tune. The resurrection existed before Christianity and had far less to do with the belief in a resurrected deity on a mystery school level. The resurrection occurred inside with the initiate. Consequently, we do not see any major problems with the seeming contradiction in saying that the power of solar consciousness exists from within the sun above, and its rays, which contain the complete package of energy from the creation of all things under it. Taking the concept as above, so below, this force is also found in the heart, mind, and soul when realized in the human who venerates. In the human who ventures down the path of the esoteric. This is perhaps the biggest secret within the mysteries, and Christianity at its deepest level incorporated this great mystery. The grand tenet of the Christ within was known to Christianity's early proponents and even made into the gospel tradition, though sometimes veiled in poetry and parable and given lesser significance. We regard this gnosis as something that emanates from nature and its laws through a harmonization with nature's processes so that it can be felt and taught successfully to others. Psalms tells us, this is 118:8, it is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man. It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in princes. This is exactly what we are going to do, teaching only what the universe tells us through its mechanisms and our objective faculties, taking what is and what works with the least effort, stripping back any second-grade perceptions that only hinder progress, and most importantly of all, never trusting in the words of other men unless our faculties accord with that knowledge. The truth of the grand architect of the natural world. The truth of the grand architecture also of the natural world. This little work will help us see that the heavens were one of the most important backdrops to our evolution in mind, and that our largest, most foundational stories were inevitably etched and invariably etched into the celestial canopy, because that divine canopy was God's canopy, and humanity used that canopy to convey its most timeless and noble stories. The heavens in the Old Testament. The edicts of the stars constitute the basis of the hidden miracles mentioned in the Torah. However, the Jew, through the power of his choice and through his walking in the way of the Torah, may rise above the astrological influences. That's Nachmanides. What came first in time should already stir the reader into considering all the blatantly mythological characteristics of other pre-Christian religions spanning many thousands of years. Osiris, Adonis, Dionysus, Baal, Apollo, and Perseus, just to name a few, exhibit clearly mythological and fantastical narrative features, many of whom have their beginnings in a great story available to all if we simply look upwards to the great celestial canopy. It is a straightforward truth that even in the Old Testament, astrology abounds, and that right in the first few verses of the Old Testament, God makes the heavens and stars for signs and for seasons. Genesis 1:14. Signs being exactly what they are portrayed as if we read the text with symbolic depth from an esoteric viewpoint. It is noteworthy then when we find the remnants of the astro-theological nature of the Bible more lucidly given in the Old Testament in key places, still there for us to ponder on. Again, in Psalms we read this. This is Psalms 19:1-4. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens, God has pitched the tent of the sun. A clear quote above, a clear quote above, evidently praising the heavens as the glory of God, quote, and the knowledge, quote, they may impart by the work of his hands. That's God's hands, quote. This is wonderfully erudite prose, and it's beautiful to see references to speech, words, and voices, not heard but absolutely integral to our world. This is all but an admission that the nature of the stars' impact on our lives was fully understood. Impacting on our lives was fully understood by the writers of this psalm, a powerful enforcing for logos in the minds of these ancients, perhaps. We will also later in we hear also later in Psalms 147:4, he telleth the number of the stars, he calleth them all by their names. Linking names to stars again, we notice another reference to the starry host and their names again in Isaiah 40:26. Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls forth each of them by name, because his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. God's great abode, written for us to ponder, and a strong association with signs, with names, and with the importance of these names. Maybe the book of Ecclesiastes can tell us more. Ecclesiastes 3:1 and 2. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal. A season for everything under the heavens. This isn't simply a diktat for planting food. Ecclesiastes goes on to list many other activities, and the fact that the word season is used is pertinent to our discussion, dividing the heavens, as Genesis tells us, and making them for signs and for seasons with no negative association whatsoever, is a strong indicator that a good many of those reading these early texts had a deep interest in stargazing and worship, which would make good sense, as two of the civilizations pivotal to the Hebrews pivotal to Hebrews' development was Egypt and Babylon, both cultures steeped in astrology, as were the Persians and Greeks, having strong astrotheological pantheons. Divination was far from being a satanic art, something that the patriarchs appeared to have used themselves, as we shall see. Just look at Job and his reverence for God and what he could do. Job 38:31-33. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the bear with his cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens, and can you set up God's dominion over the earth? This is all blatant star worship and gives a clear meaning of the power of the heavens over God's dominion on earth. In fact, taking a walk through all of Job 38 and 39 will reveal a whole host of key signs we all know today, given the obvious celestial references. Pleiades, Orion's belt, the heavens, the Mazarot, a Hebrew zodiac. Incidentally, Mazal Tov, a derivative of that word, means blessings from the stars. Clearly, we know that what those words mean. We can then run through the rest of the lengthy passages, 38 and 39, and understand what it is all about. We see verse 39. Lioness, lions, Leo. Verse 41, ravens, Corvus, bordering Virgo. In 39 now, verse 1, we find mountain goats, Capricorn, and doe, deer, Merger, deer constellation, synonyms with Orion in the Rig Vedas. Sorry. Verse 5, wild donkey. This is Acellus borealis, Latin for northern donkey, a star in Cancer. Verses 9 invoke Taurus. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? Will it stay by your manger at night? Do we find an ox by a certain celestial savior's manger? Of course, Jesus and the ox and his manger. He goes on with some wonderfully poetic references to other constellations, including a blatant reference, verse 19, to Sagittarius, with the quiver rattling against its side. But you get the picture. The symbolism is abundant and hardly hidden. Earlier in Job, we get another profound statement regarding the Hebrew God's power over the heavens. Job 9, 8 to 10. He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. He is the maker of the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades, and the constellations of the south. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. We get the obvious admittance that a supreme God self-evidently created the stars, but we get more. Amos 5, 8 and 9:6 give us these morsels of astrotheological wisdom, never condemned, actually praising God for his brilliance and omniscience in creating and ordering the celestial canopy. Notice reference to the Pleiades and Orion once again. Amos 5, 8. He who made the Pleiades and Orion, who turns midnight into dawn and darkens day into night, who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out over the face of the land. The Lord is his name. Amos 9:6. He builds his lofty palace in the heavens and sets its foundation on the earth. He calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out over the face of the land. The Lord is his name. We offer deep praise to the writers of his weighty words, and will note that there is never any negative connotation for us readers regarding the practice of knowing the heavenly canopy and its influence over us. God effectively states that it is through the powers above that he is how he runs things, that this is how he runs things. It is admiration that for God's work in guiding these celestial forces that we see again and again. Where there is confusion today, and understandably, is why certain passages appear to vilify and condemn astrology. But do they? Is it possible that they condemn people who likewise worship the stars and with whom the Hebrews actually had a great deal in common? There is ambivalence here, to be sure. 2 Kings tells us, 2 Kings 23:5, he did away with the idolatrous priests appointed by the kings of Judah to burn incense on the high places of the towns of Judah and on those around Jerusalem, those who burned incense to Baal, to the sun and moon, to the constellations, and to all the starry hosts. And here, in the passage below, Ezekiel 8:16, he then brought me into the inner court of the house of the Lord, and there at the entrance of the temple between the portico and the altar were about 25 men with their backs towards the temple of the Lord and their faces towards the east. They were bowing down to the sun in the east. The quotes above show us a pivotal point in Jewish cosmological outlook. In the Jewish cosmological outlook, something was happening. Viewed in its wider context, we can see the abominations Ezekiel is talking about, and they are blatantly astrotheological in nature, as John does in referring to his beasts of Revelation. the nature of this beast will become clear, and spoiler alert, it's almost certainly astrological. Whereas before, the zodiac and sun and its host seemed to have been worshipped openly, now the practice was being shunned and its detractors turning hostile. But what replaced it? It appears only that a watered down type of worship that was far more faith based was appearing. The occulted aspects of the religion not changing, but its outer facade now decidedly shifting to a more basic, unintelligible format. What were once openly revered deities were becoming mystified and were being ripped from people's eyes. The truth of these religions going underground, and they appear to remain so, though strangely in quite plain sight to this day. This is exemplified in astrotheological finds such as this is exemplified in archaeological finds such as the Beth Aleph synagogue in Israel, the Hamat Tiberias, and the Sephoris zodiac, where the sun god Helios is depicted right in the middle of the zodiac. I'm going to leave that there. The Helios looks very much like Jesus. This Helios zodiac here, of course, Jesus is often depicted around the zodiac in pieces of art with his followers depicted as the signs, and we're going to find out that this is indeed some fairly deep lore, and it all definitely relates. So I'm going to leave that there. I hope that was interesting for people, and we're going to continue with number 2, hopefully tomorrow, but we'll see. Thank you very much, and ciao for now.